There are objects that pass so quietly into our homes that we scarcely give them a thought. A vase here, a trinket there, a sprig of greenery set on the windowsill to brighten the room. We think them harmless, even charming. And yet history whispers warnings in hushed tones, warnings about the things we welcome without weighing their influence. Some plants, you see, are not merely plants. They are symbols, ancient markers, the shadows of old allegiances, relics of a time when men and women believed they could draw power from darkness simply by tending a leaf. Let us not be naive. Nature is good, fashioned with a purpose beyond our comprehension. But it has always been the tragedy of mankind to twist good things into distorted forms. Grain was made for bread, but man made it into drunkenness. Fire was made for warmth, but man made it into destruction. So too, certain plants became vessels, not by their own will, but by the will of those who wielded them as instruments for witchcraft, superstition, and unholy devotion. Consider the first Mandrake. Known since antiquity, its roots often fork in a way resembling the human body. That likeness gave rise to dark legends, of screams that drove men mad when the plant was pulled from the earth, of potions brewed to manipulate love or death. Though but a root, it became a symbol of sorcery itself, an object around which gathered fear and fascination. The second is Belladonna, the so-called deadly nightshade. Its berries gleam like drops of ink, beautiful and poisonous alike. Old tales insist that witches used it in their flying ointments to carry them into unnatural visions. Here is a perfect emblem of temptation, lovely to the eye, sweet upon the tongue, and deadly within the body. The third is Henbane, a plant whose very name stirs unease. Its fumes were said to summon hallucinations, its extracts to bind the will. For centuries it was tied to rituals of the occult, woven into the very language of enchantments and spells. Then there is Datura, or devil's trumpet. Its ghostly blossoms open beneath the cloak of night, and with them came the belief that spirits, too, were beckoned in the darkness. Many a ritual, darkened by secrecy, leaned upon its narcotic haze to confuse the senses and loosen the grip of reason. The fifth is Wolfsbane, also called aconite. Poisonous in the extreme, it bore a reputation as both weapon and charm. Folklore tells that it was used to ward off werewolves, as though one evil might guard against another. In truth, it carried nothing but death. And finally, Hemlock, the very plant that took the life of Socrates. Its name has long been linked with poison, but more than that, it became a tool in the arsenal of dark rites, a drink mingled in secret to blur the line between life and the grave. Now the question must be asked, are these plants themselves evil? Of course not. A leaf cannot plot, a root cannot scheme. The danger lies not in the greenery itself, but in the meaning that men have draped upon it. To invite these into one's home, thoughtlessly, is to flirt with symbols that have long been married to darkness. Symbols have power, not because wood or stone or leaf contains magic, but because our hearts are easily swayed by what they represent. One does not need to touch fire to feel its heat. In the same way, one need not practice witchcraft to be unsettled by its emblems. The danger is subtle, for it creeps in under the guise of beauty. A blossom in the corner of the room, admired for its strangeness, might in time awaken curiosity for the very practices that made it infamous. And curiosity, when left unchecked, has led many down paths they never meant to tread. The lesson, then, is discernment. We are not called to fear the created world, but to remember that creation can be twisted into an idol. Not all gifts are meant for our tables, and not every plant belongs in our homes. The old stories remind us that what we nurture may, in turn, nurture us, or undo us. Better to fill our rooms with things that breathe life, not shadows. better to tend what points to light, not darkness. Symbols are threads woven into the fabric of human life, and though they are often harmless in themselves, they acquire layers of meaning as generations pass over them. A leaf, a stone, or even a simple mark on parchment becomes more than the material it is composed of. It becomes a vessel filled with the thoughts, fears, and longings of those who interact with it. When a culture deems an object holy, it is revered. When a people deem it cursed, it is avoided. In both cases, the symbol does not change, but the heart of man responds differently because of what has been placed upon it. This is the curious paradox. That matter which cannot speak, cannot will, and cannot scheme, is nevertheless able to shape human behavior by the meaning given to it. A crown of metal is just metal until men agree it is the emblem of authority. A flag is mere cloth until men believe it represents a nation. A plant, equally, is but a creation of nature until human imagination drapes it in legends of power and darkness. Throughout history, symbols have often carried more weight than the reality they point to. Armies have gone to war not for gold or land alone, but because of banners, emblems, and relics believed to embody destiny itself. People have clutched charms not for their substance, but for the hope or fear that others had poured into them. In every age, one sees this tendency. The unseen meaning becomes more powerful than the visible thing. This is why a simple plant like Mandrake, which cannot plot any evil, has nevertheless inspired stories of screams and madness. It was not the root that held such terror, but the symbol it became in the minds of men who feared what it represented. The same is true of Belladonna and Hemlock, plants whose natural qualities were twisted into omens and tools of sorcery. They were made symbols of power, and once crowned with that reputation, they began to shape choices far beyond their physical properties. There is also a caution here about how easily the human heart attaches significance where none was intended. People do not live only by bread. They live by stories, by symbols, by the invisible meanings that give weight to life. A house with a harmless object can become restless if those who dwell in it believe the object has dark power. In such a case, the plant or stone itself has not changed anything, but the fear that men invest into it is enough to alter the atmosphere of their minds. The danger lies not in the material world, but in the imagination that misuses it. It is a kind of sorcery in itself, not the conjuring of spirits, but the conjuring of meanings that transform something neutral into something heavy with dread. Symbols also teach us about the responsibility of discernment. A wise man will recognize that meaning is often borrowed rather than natural, and he will not allow his life to be guided by shadows born of superstition. Yet he also knows that others are not so cautious, and their collective weight of belief can turn a harmless emblem into a cultural current with real influence. This is why it is unwise to welcome every symbol into one's life. Though the object may be innocent, its history may be steeped in stories that pull the mind toward unhealthy fascination. Curiosity may grow from the presence of such a symbol, and curiosity has the power to lead the soul into darker corridors. Thus the truth stands that symbols carry power not because they are alive, but because men have clothed them with layers of meaning. It is a borrowed power, yet it can feel as real as any force of nature. The crown of a king compels obedience because men agree it must. The root of Mandrake inspires fear because men believe it does. The cloth of a banner inspires courage or hatred because men have chosen to let it. What is important is not the thing itself, but the heart that gives it weight. In that heart lies the real battlefield, where the choice is made either to strip symbols of their false authority or to kneel before the stories others have written into them. Curiosity is one of the most dangerous and yet most subtle powers at work in the human soul. It begins as a whisper, a light tug on the edge of the mind, persuading a person to look where they had no intention of looking, to linger where they had no business lingering. Rarely does anyone plunge into darkness with both feet at once. Instead, the descent is slow, almost imperceptible, a series of small permissions given to thoughts and actions that seemed trivial at the time. What makes it so perilous is that these permissions rarely feel like choices of great consequence. They feel like nothing more than a glance, a question, a harmless experiment, until the day comes when the heart finds itself far from the light it once knew. History and story alike reveal how often a man's ruin begins with what appeared to be a small step, a forbidden book left open, a symbol kept for its beauty, a tale listened to with fascination. These become doors. At first, they seem to open only into curiosity, yet soon they reveal halls that twist deeper and darker than expected. The child who only meant to touch the flame discovers that the burn lingers longer than the moment. The heart, once open to such suggestions, rarely closes again with ease. It is not that every glance into darkness condemns a man, but rather that every glance weakens the barrier of caution. A wall once cracked is easier to break with every strike. The danger is that darkness rarely shows itself for what it is. It cloaks itself in beauty, in mystery, in the appeal of the unknown. What better bait is there than wonder itself? The night sky is filled with stars that stir awe, yet it is also the same sky that men have too often read with superstitions, turning the gift of creation into a map for false guidance. The same flower that is lovely to behold may have been used by sorcerers in ancient rites, and though its petals are harmless, the stories wrapped around it can awaken a fascination with the forbidden. It is in this way that careless invitations take root. A man does not set out to practice witchcraft simply because he brought a plant into his home, yet the presence of such symbols may awaken a subtle hunger to know more, to read more, to explore paths that curiosity insists are harmless. The heart must be watched with care, for it is not the plant or the object that is most dangerous, but the shift of desire within the soul. When curiosity toward darkness grows unchecked, it begins to reshape one's perception of what is acceptable. What was once forbidden begins to seem intriguing. What was once terrifying begins to feel familiar, and what was once clearly dangerous begins to appear harmless. This is the slow erosion of discernment. A little compromise here, a little indulgence there, and suddenly the soul that once walked in confidence now finds itself unsure of where the line even lies. Curiosity, when rightly ordered, is one of the greatest gifts of the mind. It is the drive to explore creation, to ask questions of nature, to uncover truth. But when it bends toward the shadowed things, it becomes a hunger that cannot be satisfied. Each answer only births another question. Each discovery only leads further into the maze. The heart that gives in to this kind of curiosity is like a wanderer in a dark forest, compelled by the sound of distant music, chasing it deeper and deeper, though every step takes him farther from safety. He believes he is only exploring, but in truth he is being drawn. What began as a careless glance becomes a pursuit, and what began as harmless curiosity becomes a chain. It is not always the grand decisions that undo a soul, but the small, unnoticed ones. A doorway left ajar may invite more than one intends to enter. To entertain even a shadow can be enough for the shadow to linger. The lesson, then, is not that curiosity itself is wrong, but that it must be guarded, directed, and disciplined, lest it lead the heart into places from which it is not easily returned. Discernment is the quiet strength of the soul, the ability to distinguish between what merely appears harmless and what truly nurtures life. It is the art of weighing not only the substance of a thing, but the spirit it carries, the atmosphere it fosters, and the direction it points us toward. A home is not merely a shelter of walls and windows. It is a sanctuary of the heart, a place where the unseen currents of peace, hope, and love must be guarded carefully. What enters that space has the power either to enrich or to erode, to kindle light or to invite shadows. The challenge lies in recognizing that not everything attractive is good, and not everything common is safe. The responsibility of discernment is to choose wisely what belongs in the sanctuary entrusted to us. Many believe that danger is always obvious, that evil arrives with a frightening face, clear enough to send any rational soul fleeing. Yet the truth is often otherwise. Shadows creep in quietly, clothed in beauty, dressed in fascination, wrapped in stories that entice the imagination. It is rarely a blatant threat that weakens the soul, but the subtle charm of what seems trivial, what seems too small to matter. A plant admired for its strangeness, a trinket kept for its mystery, a relic valued for its connection to old tales. These do not storm the gates of the home, they slip in through open doors of carelessness. Discernment is the discipline of recognizing that even these small allowances shape the spirit of a household, for symbols and stories carry influence beyond their visible form. A discerning heart does not live in fear of creation, but it refuses to be naive about how creation can be misused. Every gift of nature was fashioned with purpose, yet history shows again and again how men have taken those gifts and turned them into instruments of superstition, of idolatry, of darkness. The wise man does not scorn the leaf or the stone, but he asks what meaning has been fastened to it, what story it will whisper to the soul if it rests on the windowsill or hangs above the door. For the danger is not always in the thing itself, but in the meaning it carries, the curiosity it stirs, and the path it opens in the imagination. Discernment listens for these whispers, and if they are voices of shadow, it chooses not to welcome them inside. The task of discernment requires patience, for it is easier to follow the crowd and accept whatever others say is fashionable or harmless. It is easier to decorate the home without thought, to collect what is curious, to repeat what is traditional. Yet ease is rarely the mark of wisdom. Discernment requires a stillness of spirit, a pause to ask, does this draw the heart upward or downward? Does it breathe life or suffocate it? Does it kindle light or invite shadows? The answer to such questions is not always obvious, but the very act of asking is itself a safeguard, a way of training the heart to see beyond appearances. When discernment is absent, homes become cluttered not only with objects, but with atmospheres. Peace gives way to unease, joy becomes clouded by unrest, and beauty is dimmed by a subtle heaviness. The home, which should be a place of clarity and rest, becomes instead a dwelling of confusion. But where discernment reigns, there is order, not in the sense of bare walls and empty tables, but in the sense that everything present belongs, everything chosen contributes to life. Such a home becomes not just a dwelling place but a refuge, a place where light is guarded and shadows find no welcome. To practice discernment is to remember that every choice shapes the soul, and every invitation opens a door. One cannot guard the heart while neglecting the home, for the two are bound together. The home reflects the inner life, and the inner life is influenced by what the home holds. Thus discernment is not about denying beauty, but about choosing the kind of beauty that points to life rather than death, to hope rather than fear, to truth rather than deception. In every choice, The discerning heart looks for what carries light and refuses what carries shadow, for the home is too sacred a place to be filled with anything less.